What's going on, Workforce? Brian here, and in today's video we're talking about a DualShockers interview from yoshi-p. Now, if you have not seen this interview, we're going to only cover a few key points out of it. The link in the description below if you guys want to see all, the information out of it. So they're talking with Soken, they're talking with yoshi-p, obviously talking about 5.0, the next expansion, maybe some hints at jobs, and other different things like that, which we're going to talk about, in brief, because I do want to make sure you guys go out and support this link. Be sure to click on the link and give the DualShockers, in this case, the support, and also, thank them for this interview. It's because of that we get to actually talk about this thing today. One of the big key takeaways, though, is the data center structure, talking about the concept of mega servers. And that's one of the things that I actually am personally really excited about and hope we'll end up seeing. Namely because just at the root of it, I've always seen Eureka from a technical perspective as something that came in before the technology in the game existed. And that's namely why is Eureka instanced as opposed to just being out and about in the world. And that has to do with the fact that the data center would not be able to be matched together to participate in the content. And I think we kind of hint at this here, and so we're going to go over the interview, some of these questions, we'll talk about them. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really excited. I think there's some really cool takeaways from here, but without further ado, let's go ahead and just do this thing. So the question is, Yoshi-san, if you're sticking to the schedule so far, the next expansion is probably a year away. What stage of development are you in? And Yoshi says, we're still at the entrance of hell. One person is already in hell, and since I have to think not only about the present, but also the future, since I'm very involved with the game's design, I have to work on what's going on now, as well as thinking about what's going to happen in the future. I'm the first person to enter hell. The next comes the scenario team, which is going to write the story. Then comes the battle design team, and the last to enter hell is the sound team. And so they ask, so the scenario team is not in hell yet? And Yoshi says, actually, one person in the scenario team is in hell. And again, you tell us who, and yoshi-p says, that's a secret. So, honestly, I have to always commend, game development is so hard, the amount of time and effort, and as well as maintaining the existing structure and the team size that we've talked about in previous interviews. I just find this particularly interesting as a part of the process to see that obviously Yoshi enters first, scenario team writing the story, then the battle team, and then finally the sound team. To kind of bring it all together and put it together as well. So then they ask, you may or may not remember, but before Stormblood was officially announced, I asked you what kind of job would you personally like to see in the game, and you told me Red Mage. And just like that, Red Mage happened. Of course, it's totally a coincidence. So is there a job that you'd personally like to add in the next expansion? And Yoshi says, personally, I think it'd be cool to have an arithmetician from Final Fantasy Tactics. In the second part of the Return to Ivalice, in one of the battles, we actually had math problems, so maybe we could find a job that uses numbers in battle. Alright, I'm not going to say anything more about new jobs. There could be no new jobs in the expansion. We don't know. It could happen that there is no expansion. And honestly, that would be really a shocker if they decided, a dual shocker. If they didn't we go out to FanFest and they're like, no, we're good. We're going to go with 4.6, 4.7. That'd be interesting. I think probably pretty disappointing, I would have to say. As far as new jobs, they could easily, let's say they reinvented the battle system. They could easily, basically, you could say we've got 15 new jobs. With the fact that we got Red Mage and Samurai, we still got all these new jobs because we got new ways to play those jobs. And I also kind of view that as a way that, let's say they decided to bring in the battle system, or with the logo system being that it's kind of, you can change your role. We don't really fully know what that is, and we'll find out obviously here in kind of the mid-patch of 4.4. But at the end of the day, just with that alone, you could easily see, imagine if they made it to where the jobs had different roles, or they decided to get rid of the class system and it was jobs, and they really just redid that whole piece. Yeah, I don't think necessarily it'd be disappointing not to see a Blue Mage or a Dancer, which are two kind of real popular ones, or even an Arithmetician. It's always kind of fun to get that job announcement, but at the end of the day, if the whole system's redone, I don't think it is. Who knows, man? What if he's setting the expectation here? Love to know your thoughts. If no new jobs in 14 5.0, what would your takeaway be? What would you want to see, really, if they didn't do new jobs? What would you want to see to kind of replace that missing, obviously, kind of gap in content? Anyway, then they go on to ask, what about a new race? And then, maybe Vieira? And then yoshi-p just laughs and says, next. And then they talk about, obviously, Return to Ivalice, and Masanu's role in it. I'm going to leave that in the interview itself. I'd recommend you go check that out because it is really interesting, as well as part of his process as well. But as it relates to 14, maybe not so much. So again, go click the link and check out what they talk about with Matsu. But we're going to talk about the next question. We haven't heard much about Final Fantasy XI in a while, and so they ask, I'm guessing that Final Fantasy XI is drawing to the end of its life cycle. Are you thinking that when the time comes that Final Fantasy XI will draw in, or Final Fantasy XIV will find ways to draw in those, I guess, orphan Final Fantasy XI players? And Yoshi says, being in charge of Business Division 5, 11 is still part of his group. And I can tell you right now that it's still going strong and that there are no plans to end it anytime soon. This year we have a lot of patches and a lot of plans. We're going to talk about it in the coming months, and even if it's not a new expansion, which it'd be really interesting to see if they did a new expansion to 11. Yet the team and the producers want to liven up the project, so you're going to see the results in the next few months of work within the team as well as the PR teams. You'll feel that the game is still going strong. If and when, maybe even 10 years in the future, Final Fantasy XI finally ends, then yes, we'd be completely open to doing some kind of promotion for those players. Maybe if they move to 14, we'd give them a year's free subscription or something like that. Then, or with that being said, we don't want to force those players to move into 14. If they're completely different games, so it has to be their decision. The memoirs of players have the Vanadil are memories of Vanadil, and it's because it's Vanadil that those memories are so strong, and we'll do everything in our power to keep those servers up for players, and it's important for us. Man, you know, the thing that I guess as a longtime Final Fantasy XI player, I played for like 7 years that game, and I haven't touched it since 14 came out. I went back and kind of tooled around with it, and it was super difficult to set up my controller, and I really kind of remember those things, because obviously 14 from a controller perspective is just perfect. Anyhow, I would just sit here and say, when they talk about liven it up, man, it's like if they were able to bring in more quality of life, you know, just from a quest, like there's a couple of key things that I think would tempt me back to 11, just to be able to experience it. It's a very different game, absolutely for sure, and we haven't heard much about the mobile version of it. They keep, you know, it's rumored, they talked about it, yoshi-p said when the battle system is done that they're going to bring it up and things like that, but you know, I have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see, obviously, with it. But it's good to see that them continue to support this. That also means they're probably going to apply the same kind of love and support with 14 as it continues to get older and get better, hopefully, with time. I really would love to see what they want to do with 11, because right now it's only on PC. Obviously, we have a new generation of consoles, and 14 is on PlayStation. But, man, it'd be neat to see if they decided to bring, you know, some kind of graphical upgrade, some kind of technical upgrade to it. It was originally written on the PS2 architecture. It has since migrated over to PC, and they've been able to do more things, but I don't know. I'd like to know what you guys think on this one. So there's a question about grand companies, and then we're going to talk about role-playing and really how it leads into the data center, or at least the server structure in general. So he asks, you're finally implementing the captain rank for grand companies. Is it something that you're considering to accelerate in the future, or will we have to wait several more years to get major and higher ranks? And yoshi-p says, we feel that the grand company content has become a bit too simple, always doing the same thing over and over. I don't personally like that, so I want to change things up a bit. To change things up will require time. We ask players to give us a little bit more time after we implement Captain. Yet, it's that time that we're going to be thinking about something new. Personally, I would love to see them bring back Conquest. Conquest being a system from Final Fantasy XI. Lore-wise, literally just make it to where, like, we're patrolling the zones. It's kind of passive, grand company content. Who can control the most zones week over week? Brings the servers together, gives us unique rewards, maybe even reduces teleportation costs, and other various little quality of life things. Just a little bit of bragging rights. We're not at war with each other, but we're fighting back Garlemald. We're fighting, we're keeping the beast tribes at bay. We're doing whatever we're doing as a part of the instanced and open world content to do that. Obviously, that is my vote. I think that's something that is easy, simple, and passive. And yes, I'd love to see more involvement with the grand companies. Like we haven't, gear-wise, it's like we haven't seen any, gear that's any part of progression in a very, very, very long time. But I think this is important. I'd love for them to also create some new stuff surrounding the grand companies. I think it's important as we go into 5.0, namely because, who is really standing against the forces of Garlemald? Us. But then I'm going to jump back to the roleplay question. Speaking of role players, will Balmung ever open up to new players? And then he says that we have things in store, but some that players will probably won't expect, and they really can't talk about it. I'm really hoping that this means that the further walls are going to break down between the servers, and that kind of gets into the last bit of this interview, which I think is the most important. A few minutes ago, you mentioned something unexpected about servers. 4 years ago, you told me that the server infrastructure could support mega servers in the future. Are you still thinking about letting players move freely between servers? And then yoshi-p says, that is something that we've thought about the wall created by the different data centers if it didn't exist. Getting over that would be very challenging. Recently, we made it possible for players in the same data center to interact, gradually breaking down the walls between servers. We understand that the community is strong. Having those walls represented by the data centers is not the best situation. We would like everybody to be together, and that is a technical limitation. We're working on breaking down those down and figure out ways around them. Slowly but surely, hopefully one day we can get to the point where we're all together. And that is the direction. That is fantastic news. Personally, I hope to see more, and as it relates to 5.0, more and more of 5.0 getting rid of the walls within the own data center to start. Obviously, we're hoping to see some matchmaking with the with the different data centers themselves. That would be really interesting and exciting to see. But as it relates to we play on Aether, I'm hoping that we will see essentially all the zones essentially being instanced, so that as you play the game, everybody on Aether, if you're in ULA, it's going to balance the zone out accordingly. So that maybe, let's say it caps at 200, or the ideal, I guess, volume of people per zone is set at some number. And then it just instances the zones. We already have the ability to instance the individual zone, and we typically see that around the expansions live to help get more people through the zones as possible. But what I'm hoping to see overall is that just to bring more life into the open world, that the zones themselves are already instanced and the data center is all together, etc. So that if we're playing in a party, it might match us into zone instance number 2 for ULDA or whatever zone we're working on. And then that way the world always feels alive, no matter whether you're starting the game out fresh or whatever. And so that as the data center, essentially we are one mega server itself. And then obviously working towards the bigger mega center between all the different data centers. This is the best news I've seen, and personally I hope that we'll see that come 5.0. With 3.5, when we got the original cross-world data center feature, that was so refreshing and breathed so much more life into it, into the game, because all of a sudden there was just so many more players to play with, and obviously doing that content, especially if it was kind of a little bit older content, was a huge refresher to the game as it exists today. So hopefully we're going to continue to see that. That's what I'm really looking at. Like when I look at Eureka and its weaknesses, it's that if the system existed to where it was just open world, and then you go into it and then it matches you with the data center itself, you could easily invite people into your party. There's so much more that you would have access to, because that's what it feels like. It feels like this was their answer, because they don't have the ability to bring the whole data center together as one mega server, and then have each of the zones instanced out and balanced automatically based off of the player base. That's what when I look at that, that's the shift that I could see that from a technical hurdle would resolve some of the issues that I've had with Eureka and other people have had as well. Even with the Diadem and some of these instant zones, so much instant content being in the game due to that limitation. Because obviously, you want to play with people, and if you don't have people to play with, the content just kind of dies, like Diadem in that case. Anyway, that's the interview. There are some other questions. They talk about roleplay, some interesting stuff. Again, check the link in the description to go see this interview for yourself. I'd love to know your thoughts on anything I talked about on with the interview itself. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that conversation. But guys, for Work to Game, my name's Brian. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Hey everybody, Brian and Chuck here for Work to Game. Chuck wants to tell you that you should totally subscribe to the channel, and that you should totally hit that like button. Oh, and then we also got t-shirts on sale for some reason. That's a little bit mean, Chuck. I'm not crazy.